It's time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you saying, "By George, I think he's got it." Now, here's George.
Well, hello, hi, how are you? And welcome on in to another podcast by George LiveLine. It's a big one. It's an exclusive today. I'm really excited about this. It's about Hero, the documentary, the story of Jason Oglesbee. I said, the first time I heard about Jason, this is Hollywood. I mean, this could be a movie, and it's finally going to happen. Colin Laveau is telling the story of Jason Oglesbee. And for people that may not know, there's an image of Jason that's forever emblazoned in the minds of anybody from the Midwest. Let me bring this up, show it here. That's Mary Chind with the Des Moines Register took that photo of Jason Oglesbee as he was dangling from a chain connected to a crane over the Des Moines River, reaching into the chop at a Lowhead Dam to save a woman. Her name is Patty Ralph Neely. Jason was able to save her. She was going to perish in the river there. Her husband did, and he was able to save her life. And I'm just delighted to have Colin Laveau, the filmmaker, the movie guy, coming on Podcast by George to talk about that. And by way of introduction, I want to bring this next slide up. This is there we go with the LiveLine graphic for Colin. He's an independent filmmaker. He might best be known for his music for people in this part of the country. He's a singer for Decadent Nation. He is the singer, performing what he describes as high-energy, socio-political alternative rock. I love that stuff. And you might think like Stone Temple Pilots, maybe Queens of the Stone Age, stuff like that. Great music. Colin also hosts the Big Muddy Music Hour Sunday nights on KBIA FM. He's a river guy. Let's meet him. Let's bring him into Podcast by George. Colin, good morning to you, and thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, man, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Well, we're delighted to have you, and I know most people, and people of my pod that watch it particularly, are aware of the story of Jason Oglesbee, but I do have a little video that I shot of the river when I was down at one of your locations. And it also shows Jason some AP footage making this save. And I want people to watch this, and this will get us started here. So here we go. Okay, so that's the gist of it. And people in this neck of the woods, Colin, they've seen that footage. They've seen the photo. They are reminded of it regularly in the Des Moines Register. I'm reminded of it often because I wrote some lyrics for a song that Bob Pace performs that we all get to see. And, it's top of mind up here. Now, you're down there in Missouri. How did you become aware of the story of Jason?
Well, it's interesting because I actually consider Des Moines to be a second home to me. My wife is from the Des Moines area, and her parents live in Johnston. And so pretty much for the last 14 years, I've been up in the Des Moines area frequently, and I love Des Moines. I mean, if it wasn't for those winters y'all get, I might even consider moving there. But even the 4.5 hours between there and here, you'd be surprised and how much of a difference the temperate climate can be. But I had no idea about this story until I was on Reddit about 6 months ago, and I love Reddit. I'm on Reddit every single day. It's you just never know what you're going to see. And on the front page of Reddit, in the top post in the photos subreddit, are pics I saw this image and it immediately just drew me in. I was like, what is going on here? And then I saw in the title that it was Des Moines River. And I'm like, what? How have I not heard of this? And so I did a little digging, and of course, the first thing that I read was Kyle Munson's piece after Jason passed, and it brought me to tears. And it's one of those things where I've been kind of looking for inspiration. I had worked on films in my early 20s, long enough to know I was at a time and place in my life where I wasn't ready to dive into that as a career, even though I wanted to be a filmmaker my entire life. And I told myself that when I came back to filmmaking, it'd be on my own terms. And since then, I've created my own business, a digital agency, in which I've been able to do videography and stretch those creative muscles in that way. But in terms of artistic expression, that usually lends itself to my musical endeavors. And but this year in particular, I had been kick around script ideas. Actually, I wasn't planning on making a documentary. I was just thinking about making a short film, a narrative, and literally within probably 30 minutes of me seeing that image, the gears started turning. At first, I was like, "Man, this would be a great thing to make an actual movie out of, like what you mentioned." But I'm like, man, no one's going to give me like $100 million for a first-time filmmaker just to try and recreate that would be insanity. So essentially, I said, well, I can make a documentary, and so that's what I'm doing.
Well, that's cool. I want to bring this up, and the stream here is breaking down a little bit. I'm going to hope that it holds here, or maybe even improves as we go along. If not, Colin, I might ask you to log off and come back right in. It'll just take a minute or two.
Yeah, my internet is terrible where I'm at. It might be best if I log off and tether to my phone. Honestly, I should have done that beforehand.
Okay. Well, that's all right. Let's do this. I want to show this to start with. Because I gotta get this on screen here. This is great. This is a shot that was taken of Colin and his crew here in Des Moines. Talk about these folks, Colin.
Geez, man, get choked up just looking at those guys.
Yeah.
I knew I needed a team, and luckily there's no shortage of really talented individuals where I'm at to help me pull this off, because I knew I couldn't do it by myself. So much of what I've been doing for years has just been running and gunning and doing stuff with me and one other person. But on the far left, it's Austin Kolb. He's one of the most talented videographers I've ever met. He works for a company and owns a company called Evoke Group. And so he's probably the most seasoned videographer of the bunch. And next to him is Matlack, who was actually a full-time employee of mine at LV Creative up until about a month ago, because he's moving to the Bahamas. Another insanely talented videographer and photographer. Next up is my beautiful wife, Alicia. She's also a producer on the project, and we would have been dead in the water in many instances without her helping us coordinate what were a lot of moving pieces on the ground there. There's me, and next to me is Tim Pilcher, who is our sound tech, who he didn't arrive until Friday, but he really helped with some more complicated shoots, like two of which you were there for, in which we had multiple people mic'd up, and we had the live performance by Bob Pace. We had a scene at a church that did a sermon about Jason, and of course the bridge scene that we shot on Sunday. And then on the far right there is Garrett Curry. Who actually is turning 21 years old today. And he's the youngin' of the bunch, but man, he's so talented, and he was a really invaluable production assistant. He was our runner, and aside from being
I
a
love
runner,
watching that guy. Holy cow, man, he can sprint. I'm telling you, that guy's got legs. He can move around. All right, I wanted to show that graphic. Now I'm going to ask you to go ahead and log off and come back in, and I'll bring you back, and I'm going to give this background a little bit on the Jason Oglesbee story for people that aren't aware, and we'll bring you back in when you come back.
All right, sounds good.
So, folks, Jason Oglesbee, the story, the big save is what we call it in this neck of the woods, in this part of the country. It was on June 30th in 2009. Patty Ralph Neely and her husband were in a small boat, and they were on the Des Moines River, and they were scouting out a place to watch the July 4th fireworks. and they got too far down the river. They got too far, too close to this Big Head Dam. And if you've never been on the river and never been close to one of these dams, people say, they went in. Well, yeah, maybe. But really what happens is it pulls you in, it drags you in, and it capsized their boat. And you saw her in the film clip. The rescuers couldn't get to her. Those boats that you saw, those rubber rafts, those were people trying to get to her with equipment made for that, and they couldn't do it. And so Jason Oglesbee is working with a construction crew on the pedestrian bridge. It's got a big arch. He's up at the top of the thing. And they decided, and I think Jason had a role in this, that if they put a chain on him and put him on that crane, they could dangle him out over the river and he could grab her. And it didn't work to start with. I mean, it wasn't easy, but he was able to do it. He saved that woman's life. That was in 2009. And he refused interviews. He didn't want to be a star. He just kind of wanted to go back to his regular life. And there were parts of Jason's life that weren't good. And that's going to be a part of this documentary, I'm sure. It's a part of the song that I wrote. And in 2017, Jason collapsed of an overdose, and other heroes jumped in. Life Flight brought him from Creston to Des Moines, and it was in a raging thunderstorm. And there comes our pal back, Colin. It was in a raging thunderstorm. Those helicopter guys were able to get him up to the hospital, but unfortunately, in just a matter of days, he succumbed, and Jason was gone. That was in the article, that Kyle Munson story that Colin mentioned. I saw that. And I tell everybody, it was like, my God, a hero, an American hero. Those guys don't die. Yeah, they do. And Jason did. And that's the backdrop, the context for this movie. And I guess, Colin, my first question for you really was, a lot of times you hear about tragedy and triumph. This was kind of triumph, saving the woman, and then tragedy with the death of Jason.
Yeah, a lot of what we dove into were some really tough topics. I've interviewed plenty of people, whether it's on my radio show or for videos that we produce with LV Creative over the years, but I've never talked about heavy stuff like I did. And it was difficult for me. It was difficult for the subjects, but at the end of the day, what I started to realize, especially leading up to the shoot, was that this was an opportunity for a new form of catharsis and closure for the subjects of this film, whether it was Jason's mother or Patty or Al Ralph's daughter, Shannon, and Patty's stepdaughter. And that's why I wanted to take them out to the bridge. Aside from finding a coda to the film itself, after reflecting on all these stories and reflecting on the past, I wanted to provide an opportunity for folks to kind of put some of these more difficult aspects of the story behind them, and I think that's what happened.
Well, there's an excellent. I mean, I just love these. I peeled these off of the Facebook pages for the movie.
Could I say something about the behind the scenes photos?
Yeah.
I feel so blessed because we just had a full crew of photographers. Like everyone, even Tim. And to by extension, even my wife Alicia, just who aren't photographers by trade, just got some really fantastic photos, and I'm going to treasure these forever.
Well, absolutely, and I know now one of the triumphs maybe for me personally and being involved in all of this is I got to know Sharon and Gail, very good friends of my wife and mine now, and I just love the woman, and I know that you got to meet her for the first time. And I guess my takeaway when I talked to Sharon and Gail, there are kind of folks, Colin. These are plain-spoken, Midwest, honest-talking people. And I kind of get that sense when I look at this particular photo and you interviewing or doing kind of a prep with Sharon.
Yeah. Actually, what's happening in this photo is I'm telling Sharon the events of what took place on the night that Jason overdosed, and this wasn't on camera. But the interesting thing about things like overdoses and some of the stuff that we talk about in this film is only a few people are there for such harrowing moments. And what happens in small towns like Creston, which I have come to learn has had is kind of, if there was ever a billboard for the opioid epidemic and drug problems in small communities in the United States, Creston might be on that billboard. And what's unfortunate is, as a result of what happened that night, a lot of rumors, of course, take place in these small towns, and Sharon didn't really have the full story on what happened. And there was a subject that I was hoping to get on camera that was there that night, but she was so traumatized by it that she just couldn't do it. And I didn't want to push her, but I wanted to know because I felt like it was important for Sharon to know. And she told me so I could tell Sharon the truth about what happened that night.
Wow. So some of the truth is coming out for the first time to folks like Sharon. So that's really one of the big questions that I had for you, and one of the biggest promotions for the movie. There's a lot of people in this part of the country that have seen and heard this a lot. They've heard this song and all that. They think they know the story. I don't think they do, Colin, and I think it's going to be revealed in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, just with every conversation I had with the subjects leading up to the filming of it, I would learn something new, and I just knew I knew it was going to be a compelling story, because there's the events that happened whenever Jason rescued Patty, of course, and then there's the story of who Jason was, which is another big piece of this, but there's so much more, and I had high hopes for what we were going to find in terms of being able to create a compelling story beyond just those two elements. And what took place in our initial jaunt of shooting last week far exceeded my expectations. And I think I think we have something special in the can right now. We have over 10 hours of footage that I have to whittle down, and there's more that I'm going to be coming up to Iowa probably in the next week, actually, with a smaller crew. And there's more I have to capture, and we're going to have to whittle this thing down up to less than 2 hours. And it's going to be editing is going to be one of my biggest prides, and also one of my biggest daunting tasks that I've ever faced in my life. So
yeah. Because everything doesn't make it in. I mean, that's what editing and the cutting floor is all about, and those are tough choices that have to be made. I want to bring this up too, because this is another interesting angle about this. There's this song, "What Makes a Hero," and as I mentioned at the onset, Colin's a musician, so he's got an ear for this. He's got an affinity for this, and he got to meet our old buddy, our old pal here. Let me see if I can bring this up on the screen so that we can get him in here. Okay, so there he is peeking out from behind the camera there. This is a nice shot too, because you can see the monitor there on the camera, and that's Bob Pace. Tell us a little bit about your meeting with Bob Pace, Colin.
Yeah, so as soon as I started doing a little bit of research on Oglesbee, some of the first videos that came up on YouTube were live performances of the song that you wrote for Bob. And, as you mentioned, I host a radio show, Big Money Music Hour, playing what's relevant in music from the country of the Midwest and beyond. And I am a musician, and so it was a no-brainer for me to try and incorporate that and have a musical interlude that's going to be separate from the score that I'm having written for the film itself, because the score is going to be very minimalist, and a lot of strings and things of that sort, mostly cello and violin movements and whatnot. And so for me to be able to have a kind of a musical break in the story was a big deal for me. I mean, it's anything I make, it's going to, music is going to play a big part of the story.
Well, I talked about the tragedy and the triumph, the timeline, the story of Jason Oglesbee. What about the timeline for you now, Colin, with this movie? And I've been asked several times, And I know these things are fluid. You've got the shooting, you've got the editing, the final production, the distribution. What's the timeline for this?
Well, I'm actually going to start my first bit of editing tomorrow. So I'm chomping at the bit to get rolling on that. And I've never done this before. I've never had to whittle down 10. I mean, the longest piece I've ever done, is maybe 20 minutes, a half hour. So, I don't know how long it's going to take. That's going to be January before the score comes back and is recorded and mixed and mastered. So, my hope is that I'm going to have a rough edit by the end of January, something that I can actually send out to film festivals. And, it's beyond that fluid. You use the word fluid. That is definitely going to be the case with this because, I'm going to essentially try to submit the film to film festivals, work with some documentary agencies to try and get this thing landed on a streaming service, or maybe even get theatrical distribution to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a reason why I shot these on this whole thing on Lumix cameras. There's only particular cameras that Netflix will even consider your project for. It has to at least be shot 75% on particular cameras. And so, my I never do things in half measure. I don't enter into projects without having lofty goals in mind. And after going through this past week, I feel like those lofty goals are maybe a little bit more attainable than even I had imagined.
Yeah, well, we'll stand by. I mean, I can't wait to see it. This is a tough question, but it's something that you're experienced in. I think because of your music and your broadcasting background, I've always felt that it's a little tougher to get things out, to get them out nationally and worldwide from the Midwest. If you're on the coast, I don't know. It seems a little bit easier. Oh, this is coming out of L.A. Okay. Oh, this is coming out of New York. I mean, it seems like they get a little, kind of a head start on us when it comes to distribution of music, film, and those type of things. Is that still true, do you think, or not so much?
I think it just depends on what you're talking about. I've been around the block on a lot of different, creative mediums, whether it's music, bands, what have you. And I feel like if you have the right, public relations and it takes money is what it takes, to be able to do it right. Now, that being said, something that definitely flies in the face of the argument that you have to be on the coast is right here in Columbia, where there is a film festival called the True False Film Festival. It's the world's largest documentary film festival. And so Columbia is already kind of a documentary mecca of sorts. It's not like many of the films you'll see at True False Film Festival will be among them will be the 5 nominees you'll see for Best Documentary at the Oscars. But just this year and right now on Netflix, there's a film that was made by a University of Missouri professor from here in Columbia called Procession, which I highly recommend everyone go watch. It's a very difficult watch, particularly about abuse in the Catholic Church. But he's from Columbia, and he took his film to the Telluride Film Festival, got picked up by Netflix, and the rest is history. And more than likely, Netflix is going to be pushing that film in their best documentary category. So it's all. There's so many factors that lend itself to success and distribution, no matter what medium you're talking about. And I didn't go into this just we'll get it in the can and see what happens. I have a plan, and we'll see if it works.
Well, my reaction to it was that these guys know what they're doing. We saw that photo of the crew earlier. Those people are all good. They've got excellent equipment. Colin had a drone up over the river with a camera. I mean, this is going to be a good-looking film, I think. I really enjoyed meeting everybody. And I'm going to play another clip here real quick. I mentioned, and we saw the image of Sharon Stewart, the mother of Jason Oglesbee. When we were down on the river, I asked Sharon what her reaction to this all was. A couple of things are going to strike you about this. Again, this plain spoken, honest answer that she gives. This is great. So, I know that Colin's going to enjoy this. So here comes Sharon.
It's really been fun. It's been just a whirlwind, and I kind of needed this right now because Jason has a younger brother that we're having problems with, and he's 40 years old, and he was always kind of jealous of Jason, and so this kind of lifts Gail and I up a little bit to know that there's more to life than just being beat down all the time.
Yeah, so that goes to the bittersweet nature of this and the struggles of Sharon and Gail and their family. They're continuing. I mean, it's not over yet. This legacy of Jason Oglesbee is far reaching. I don't know that it will ever be over with. And this movie is going to be a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it all just goes back to the fact that, that to a certain extent, there's a part of me that almost felt guilty, reopening a lot of these wounds.
Yes.
I mean, in particular, I mentioned the individual that was there whenever Jason overdosed.
Yeah.
And, I talked to her twice, and that was a couple of the most difficult discussions I've had all week, and it wasn't even on camera. And she told me what happened, and it's just harrowing. And then she told me also that since she just knew that this film was being made, out of all the people that I talked to, she had the most trauma.
She's got stories, yeah.
Yeah, she definitely had the most trauma. She essentially he didn't die in front of her, but he was basically brain dead. And she was giving him CPR, and it's stuck with her for years. And I mentioned all these rumors that get spread about an individual like this in a small town, and what people assume she did. And so I was trying to get her to come on camera and set the record straight, but she tells me, she would tell me how, just since she knew that I was making this documentary, she can't sleep at night. Because it's triggering all this trauma. And, it's difficult. There's a part of me that feels guilty to do this. But again, I take a look at the responses I've been getting from these subjects before, during, and after. And I think that they're thankful that I'm doing this, not just because they want to celebrate Jason in a way he wouldn't allow whenever he was alive, but also because I'd like to think that it helped them to a certain extent.
Here's something I'd like for you to talk about here, and if you're running into a time crunch, let me know, Colin. But
I could probably do about 6 more minutes.
Okay. This question is kind of the two worlds, and the world of Jason, it's kind of the world that I grew up in. I was around people like that, and when I spoke to the woman that you're talking about, that you've interviewed, I was struck by this dichotomy. It kind of goes to this socio-political alternative situation in your music as an example. There are two Americas in this country, and there's two different worlds. Jason had a world. And most people don't realize or have any understanding of what that's like. I mean, I talk to people that say they know alcoholics, or they were an alcoholic. They drank 5 or 6 beers a day. Folks, that's not the kind of alcoholics that I grew up with. That's not the kind of people that I was around. I mean, this is a severe situation. This is a dark story in a lot of respects.
Yeah, and I think and that, to that point, you need look no further than the two worlds that Jason lived in throughout most of his adult life. There was in prison and out of prison, and when he was in prison, he was doing great. He found Jesus, and he took a lot of comfort from teachings of Christianity. He stayed in shape, and his mind was clear. And there's even hints in some of the letters that he would write his folks, on the outside, to where, he kind of liked it. He kind of liked being in prison. And as much as he would talk about cleaning up his act, whenever he got out, he just couldn't do it. Take a look. He was working for Kramer and Associates, the bridge company that he was working for whenever he saved Patty. and he was a great employee. Chad Colbank, his boss, told me that he was one of the best employees that he's ever had. But that was whenever he was in the halfway house. When he was in the halfway house, he still had some guardrails that was keeping him, on the straight and narrow, if you will. But as soon as he left the halfway house, all of his old friends came back around, and he fell into the same patterns. And that's the real tragedy of it all, because you're right. I mean, 6 beers a night. a lot of people, are problem drinkers, but like actual alcoholics, actual addicts. That's what tears the very fabric of our society apart. And if anything, I hope this film can shed a little light as to the ramifications of those patterns.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's everybody's hope, and that's Colin's hope, and that's the reason for the movie. Let's bring this. I'm going to play this clip real quick, and then we'll let Colin go because he's short on time. This is Sharon again talking about what she hopes will come from the movie.
How wonderful he was as a child growing up, and hard worker. He was one of the hardest workers. He would do anything for anybody. How much we loved him, and treated me like a really wonderful mother.
Gotta love her. That's Sharon Stewart. Well,
She's
Colin,
great.
yeah, she is great. Again, good on you, man. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Kind of give us the, the basics, the fundamentals now of where people can follow along. I know you've got a Facebook page dedicated to this. People that want to track the movie as it progresses. Tell us how to stay in touch.
Yeah, so you can follow the documentary on Facebook. Hero the documentary on Facebook. It's Hero the Doc on Instagram, and so we're going to be funneling all of our news and what have you through those channels. So, keep track of it, and my hope is to have a premiere in the Des Moines area whenever it's ready to go.
I'll be there. And I want to apologize a little bit for the quality of the video, but it proves that Colin's in our part of the world, because the Midwest and parts of Iowa and Missouri don't have the best broadband in the world. Our access is not the best, and we run into that whenever.
Yeah, I live out in the boonies. I can make a pretty picture, but I just can't upload it.
Yeah, I got it. Well, that's great. Colin Laveau, filmmaker and musician. Look for A Decadent Nation. That's the other part of it when they come around, and we'll look for that movie when it comes out, hopefully soon, very soon. Colin, thanks again for coming on this edition of Podcast by George.
George, it's always a pleasure talking to you, buddy. Have a good one.
We'll be back with you real soon. That's going to end our show. That's all there is, and there ain't no more. That's another Podcast by George.